Hello and welcome to the Witness podcast with me, Mike Lanchin. Today we go back to October of 1988, when for the first time ever, Chileans got the chance to vote on the 15-year military rule of General Augusto Pinochet. It was a clear yes or no referendum to determine whether the 72-year-old dictator should stay in power. I've been hearing from one of the people at the forefront of the No campaign.
Es una campaña que fue sin precedentes, que no existía en Chile nunca, jamás.
It was an unprecedented campaign, the likes of which had never existed in Chile. But there was also a certain tension, the feeling that something was going to happen. There were great expectations and a sort of nervous energy in the country.
For the very first time, General Pinochet's military rule was on the line.
For his supporters, President Pinochet is a Latin American Charles de Gaulle, the strongman who came in to put his country back on its feet. And now the dictator who had no compunction once about stamping out political opposition in the cruelest way is campaigning for the support of his people.
Nuestra mayor duda era si es que los resultados se iban a reconocer.
Our biggest worry was whether the results would be recognized. Not whether we would win, because we were confident of that, but really because everything was under the control of the military.
Chilean advertising executive Eugenio Garcia was just 20 years old when General Pinochet and the Chilean military took power in a violent coup in September of 1973. With the support of the American CIA, they had deposed the Marxist president Salvador Allende, whose short rule had divided the country. Eugenio and his family had been keen Allende supporters.
Día del golpe de Estado en 1973, ver pasar
I remember on the day of the coup in 1973, seeing the bombers flying over the skies of Santiago, over my home. That was a very strong image for me. It spelt the end of a tradition, like a break in the culture of our country.
The military drove Allende's socialist supporters out of all public bodies, the universities, the schools and small businesses. Eugenio's father and elder brother lost their jobs. Another brother went into hiding and another into exile. But other suspected sympathisers fared worse, much worse. Tens of thousands of people were rounded up. Many of them were tortured or disappeared. But by the early 1980s, with opposition protests spreading, the military authorities were yearning for some sort of legitimacy. They wrote a new constitution and included the stipulation that a referendum should be called to reaffirm Pinochet's position as head of state. It was scheduled for October the 5th, 1988.
Cuando se anunció que haría un plebiscito, yo en realidad estaba...
When the referendum was announced, I really was very doubtful. There had been a vote before to approve Pinochet's new constitution, but it was a fraud. So we feared this could be another trap to allow him to remain in power.
Pinochet himself and most of the ruling junta were convinced that there was no way they could lose this vote. In fact, they were so confident that they even agreed to give the opposition access to the airwaves, 15 minutes each day. Eugenio Garcia was the creative director of the anti-Pinochet campaign.
Comando el no hubo mucha incertidumbre sobre qué camino.
In the No campaign, there was lots of uncertainty about what approach to take. At first, it was thought that the way was to criticise Pinochet for all his crimes. In other words, a hard-hitting campaign showing all the torture, disappearances and assassinations, calling on people to vote on the basis of denouncements. I was young and strong-headed, and I thought I knew better.
As an experienced ad man, Garcia argued that a negative campaign would frighten away undecided voters. He said that instead they needed a campaign focusing on optimism and hope, using images of people hugging each other, dancing, laughing at the military, as well as denouncing their crimes. But that didn't go down well with many in the No campaign, especially those who'd personally suffered at the hands of the security forces.
Bueno, hubo una reunión donde nosotros presentamos nuestra campaña que causó mucho estupor.
In one meeting where we presented our campaign ideas, there was a lot of surprise, because it wasn't what had been expected. They thought it was frivolous.
But Eugenio eventually won over the doubters, and in early September 1988, the No campaign was officially launched. Chile, la alegría ya viene. Chile, happiness is on its way, was the campaign's main jingle, and its logo was a rainbow, emblazoned on flags, T-shirts and across TV screens.
Y la metáfora que hicimos fue que este país estaba sobre una nube negra durante 15 años.
The metaphor we chose was that the country had been living under a dark cloud for the past 15 years, without light, oppressed, and that thanks to everyone's votes, the heavens would open and a rainbow would appear, as it does after a storm.
Fue como muy emocionante.
It was very emotional when we first saw our work on air. We even had some clips where we made fun of Pinochet, which was totally unheard of. We had a feeling of vertigo, of doing something that wasn't allowed.
De estar haciendo algo que no se debía.
But as voting day approached, fear and apprehension set in. Some of those involved in the No campaign were being followed by unmarked cars. Others were receiving anonymous threats. Eugenio got up early on polling day and drove to the university in Santiago where he voted.
Y era muy particular porque era todo silencioso.
It was so strange because everything was silent. People were walking to and from voting, but all you could hear were their footsteps. After that, I went to see my kids at my ex-wife's house. We had lunch and I stayed with them because we were all a bit nervous. My son was just a little boy and we were sort of frightened that something could happen.
Que algo pudiera pasar.
And something was about to happen, but not as Eugenio had feared.
Inside the calm and order of the government's election centre, they were still insisting that the yes vote was ahead in the count by 7 or 8%. But these results were highly selective. But outside the No headquarters, the police, the strong arm of the dictatorship, seemed to be lining up to take action. No one knew how the government would react to the certainty of defeat.
But as the night wore on, it became increasingly clear to the generals that they had no option but to recognise the results. And so around midnight, a military spokesman confirmed the No's victory by a clear margin of 56% to 44%.
Bueno, yo lloré. ¿No? Yo lloré. Solo.
I cried. I cried on my own. The kids were asleep in bed, so I was alone. It was emotional.
Era emocionante.
For 15 years, President Pinochet's opponents have sung, "He's going to fall." Last night, they changed the words, "He has fallen."
Después cuando vi a mis amigos de la campaña,
Later, when I saw my friends from the campaign, I remember saying, "Bloody hell, we won, we did it." It was such a great feeling that we'd done something that was so huge.
But having put so much of himself into the winning campaign, Eugenio felt exhausted. He says that he felt that nothing he could do in the future would compare with that feeling of success.
entonces yo tomé mi auto y
So I got into my car and just drove north to the desert, from one day to the next. I spent a couple of days there and then came back and announced to my partner I was leaving the advertising firm, that I no longer felt the motivation to continue, and that is what I did.
y eso es lo que hice.
Eugenio Garcia is now head of the state television broadcaster in Santiago. General Pinochet stayed on for another year as head of state before free elections that were won by the Christian Democrat and anti-Pinochet politician Patricio Aylwin. Pinochet then became a lifetime senator, thus protecting him from criminal prosecution. He died in December of 2006. Eugenio Garcia was speaking to me from Chile for Witness. Thanks for listening.